Hi, and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So after our last discussion on Chopin, I thought it would only be fitting if we learned a piece by Chopin. Now the problem with that is that a lot of Chopin's pieces are like at an intermediate or advanced level, so we're not quite there yet. So what I did is I took one of his famous waltzes, the Waltz in A minor, which was published posthumously, and I created an easier arrangement of it. So it's 1 page long. I'll link the sheet music below as I usually do, and you can follow along this video. All right, so backstory time. Chopin composed this waltz somewhere between 1843 and 1848, which was near the end of his life, and thus it was published posthumously, which basically means after his death. This song, the character of this piece, kind of alternates between sadness and hope, and it's really quite beautiful, as you'll hear in a minute when I play it, so you can kind of go through the sheet music and see what it's all about. And just for more details on what I mentioned earlier, this piece is originally at a grade 6 level, which is like fairly intermediate. So what I did is I simplified it to a degree where I think it'll be at like a grade 1 or 2 level. Alright, so let's take a look at the basics of this waltz. For starters, it is a waltz, seeing as that is a part of the title. If you remember from a discussion on waltzes in a previous video, which I will link to on the screen, it is in 3/4 time, usually at like a pretty moderate tempo, and it has that like bop bop rhythm in the left hand that we talked about, where it alternates like a lower bass note with 2 higher notes that kind of like fill out the chord. And there's generally like 1 chord per bar in a waltz. Another thing to talk about is just the Italian Allegretto. If you remember, we talked, I don't know when we talked about this, it was a while ago, Allegro, which means to play fast. Allegretto is kind of like a light version of that. So you're going to play like at a pretty brisk tempo, but you're not going to be like racing along. This piece also makes a good study in chords. So once you understand what the chords are in each bar, it becomes a lot easier to commit this piece to memory and just kind of internalize it a little bit better. So let's take a look and dissect some of these chords together. So to start with, we have A, C, and E. So I'm kind of just combining the bass note with the top 2 notes. A, C, and E is an A minor chord, which is a pretty obvious starting choice in a song composed in the key of A minor. The next one, we might have to rearrange these a little bit. We have A, we have D, which I'm going to put way back here, and then we have F. So I've just arranged those letters to be in root position so we can more easily see what chord it is. In this case, that is the chord D minor. So let's keep going. We have a G, a B, and an F. So you'll notice that a G major chord would be G, B, and D. There's no D in this, it's omitted. It's the 5th note of a chord, sometimes not that important, but what we do see is the 7th note, which makes this chord a G7. I'm just gonna kind of go back and label the ones we've done so far. The last chord of the line, we have G, C, and E. So if I put those in root position, C, E, G, you should know that one, that's C major chord. So I think what I would do in learning this song is just to go through it and figure out all the chords, look for patterns, and get a sense of how that all works before putting it together. Finally, we're going to discuss these little turns or trills that you see above some of the notes. So this is pretty simple. All it means is that you're going to go from, there's an E written on the staff here, and then you're going to like add a little F, you're going to turn up, and then you're going to go back to E. So you end up with something that sounds like E, F, E, but played really quickly, almost like a flick. Let's go to the piano to see what that's going to look like. So the important thing to remember about the turns is that they don't impact the rhythm. So if I was to play without the turn, all of the 8th note should fall on the beat. So that means the turn has to happen like right before the beat. Sort of, I'll show you a little slower. So here's our beat. Hear how those the extra E and F happens like just just a split second before that beat. And all of the turns in this piece work that way. So when you go into the second part, so again, if this is your beat, they kind of happen just like the split second before that beat. So keep that in mind when you're doing your turns. And again, you're just rotating the lower note and adding like a couple extra notes. So if you're sorry, let me explain that better. So B, A, E, B, A. If you're playing a turn on a beat, you're just adding another B and a C. So here's your original note. Here's your turn. Okay, so hopefully you hear the difference and that gets you figured out what's going on with the turns. So there are a couple other things to discuss here in the song today. So the first thing is a term called rubato, not rubato. So it means to play with a flexible tempo. So instead of, you know, just like a steady, very metronome-like to the beat, you want to have like just a little bit of flexibility. So this generally means to speed up a little bit as the music gains momentum, slow down a little bit as the music loses momentum. So for example, when you're zooming into a forte, that would be a good time for a slight speed up. So I'll show you. So you can kind of heard like just a subtle acceleration when I did that. And at the end of the phrase is a good time for like a subtle slowdown. So listen to the natural ebbs and flows of the piece, and that'll give you a good sense of when to add like a little speed up here and a little slow down there. The last thing we're gonna look at is something called an arpeggio. So an arpeggio is kind of like a triad. It outlines a chord, but instead of weaving back and forth the way we've done triads in the past, what an arpeggio does is it kind of powers through all the notes without looking back. So that would be an E major arpeggio that I was doing. That's what you'll see in the song is an E major arpeggio. So it goes through the three notes of E major chord, E, G sharp, B, and then again, E, G sharp, B. Now a full arpeggio would start on an E and go all the way up to, I don't know, another E, depending on how many octaves you want to do it. This is a 2-octave one. And then back down. So in this Chopin piece, we kind of have like an incomplete arpeggio, but it's an arpeggio all the same. So I just wanted to point it out. It's in the very last line of music when it kind of climbs up towards those high notes at the end. When you're playing arpeggios, you just have to watch the fingering. I have it all marked in the sheet music when you take a look at that, but you want to use different fingerings than you would for just like a regular triad. So usually you'd use the 1-3-5 formation, but for this, we need to switch it up a little bit. So what I do is I go 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. You can do like 3 or 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That would be a full arpeggio. So for the song here. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that kind of sets you up to keep going. And that is all there is to it. I shouldn't say that's all there is to it. It's actually quite a difficult piece, even though it is simplified. Especially the last line, the way I wrote it with the arpeggio, that's not how the original is written, but it's like way crazier. So if you listen to the full piano version of this piece, you'll be able to hear the discrepancies, but still sounds good even in its kind of like reduced form. So I hope you enjoy playing it. As I mentioned earlier, the sheet music can be found below, so you can click the links and follow the yellow brick road, and I will catch you next time. Microphone testing. Stop flickering.